my first question is going to be for Commissioner Williams. I know that I think you are just about to have your month anniversary of being on the job. Is that right? Go ahead. Okay. But so I think, you know, we're familiar with what the debate is about assessment and accountability, what some of the criticisms have been of the accountability system, and we'll get in more depth about those later on. But I guess I just wanted to start by asking, do you think, is this a worthwhile discussion to be having? Are you open to making modifications to the accountability system, or is it something that everything's fine and we just need to stay the course?
Well, Morgan, I think that there are a couple things to that. Number one is that let's remember how we got here. I mean, the state has been in this, now what is sort of the third iteration of our student assessment, testing, and district accountability program. And we got there because of a couple things. Number one, we were graduating students that weren't prepared for post-secondary experience. We were graduating students who couldn't read the diploma that they had. And so what we did as a state, we said there are certain standards that we want them to understand. We developed a curriculum that was aligned with those standards, and now we're developing, obviously, end-of-course exams so that those end-of-course exams are aligned, obviously, with that curriculum. There's no doubt that this is a worthwhile conversation for us to have. And there's no doubt that there's some people out here who are concerned about, I'm sure the professor will tell me, concerned about the number of tests we take, concerned about whether there's benchmarking going on in school classrooms, concerned about the use of workshops, concerned about the fact that maybe some folks are engaging in teaching youngsters how to better guess for the test. Those kind of perverse incentives. There's some smart folks, to answer the last part of your question, smart folks at TEA who are saying, you know, this is really about the accountability system more than the testing, and maybe we ought to release some of the pressure on school districts. And so maybe rather than, I'm sure there's school officials out here that are saying, you know, today there are 30 different ways that you can fail. There are 30 different tripwires. If I'm in a school and I blow the roof off in 29 areas, but I fail in one, my school is going to be designated unacceptable. So maybe what we ought to do is have sort of an index to make a determination of the performance of our schools. And I expect that the staff will present a notion like that to me sometimes in early November, and I will have an opportunity to make a determination on it. So there's thinking going on right now in the building, a couple of blocks away from here, about how we might make certain adjustments in the way we evaluate schools and districts, such that they will be in a position so we can more fairly, if you will, evaluate how they're performing.
So it sounds like your answer is yes, you are open to thinking about modification.
I could have just said yes, but I thought you wanted to have a discussion.
Just to summarize. And my next question is for Mr. Hammond. The Texas Association of Business is part of a coalition that recently held a press conference at the Capitol saying that you would vigorously oppose any additional funding for public education unless you could be certain that the current accountability system is maintained. I guess I'm curious, what does that mean? Does that mean no deviation from what is already in law now? Is there room for any kind of compromise in that position?
Well, I mean, yeah, there is some room. I mean, I just want to briefly let the people know that, you know, in Texas today, only 65% of ninth graders graduate in 4 years. Of those, only 25% are career or college ready, which is the core mission of the public school system. Not college, not UT necessarily, but something post-secondary, which is required to get a decent job that you can pay and afford to have a family, which means that only 16% of ninth graders graduate in Texas in 4 years, career or college ready. That's not acceptable to this state. You know, we pointed out that in just a few years, 30% of adult Texans will lack a high school diploma. So There are lots of reasons why we need to maintain the system. Now, as far as changes in the system, there are some that need to be made. Yes, I criticize the agency under the previous administration because I think they did a terrible job of rolling out the new testing regime. They didn't do a fair enough job of making the districts and the teachers aware of exactly what was going to be expected of them. They weren't amenable to guidance, which they should have been doing, which I felt was their job and certainly their prerogative under the statute. And I met with a commissioner and urged him to work with the superintendents and the business community to try to deal with many of what I would refer to as administrative issues of the new testing program. I think a lot of these issues could be resolved before the session, and it would be helpful to everyone involved in the debate. You know, as far as some of the other issues are concerned, I mean, I would urge that we give the test much closer to the end of the school year. And I know that Commissioner Williams is a very smart and brave, clean, reverend, et cetera, man, and that he's going to meet that goal. He's going to get that test closer to the end of the school year, which will resolve a lot of problems. So those kinds of things, absolutely.
Commissioner Pauken, what kinds of, I mean, are there modifications that can be made to the current system that will fix the issues that you see, or is it something that needs to be thrown out completely and built anew?
Well, I think that both Michael and Bill are essentially saying, let's tinker at the margins, and in a way, we've had this approach for an extensive period of time in Texas. I mean, there was a TOS test, and there was a TOX test, and now there's a STAR test, and each alliteration, we're going to get it fixed this time. And I think the model is fundamentally flawed. I think kids learn differently, and the idea of pushing everybody to go to a four-year university, which is implicit in the existing system when you have a $450 million test system for people to be college ready, when you have 4x4 restrictive curriculum as though that fits all students. What you're doing, and I see it from the workforce side, you're totally neglecting those young people who are interested in career and technical education. Quite frankly, a lot of them could get a industry certified credential if you didn't have this excessive emphasis on teaching to the test and a curriculum that forces, if you will, many of them, results in many of them ultimately dropping out of school. I've seen examples at places like the Alamo Academy in San Antonio or Craft Training Center in Corpus Christi. Kids begin working with their hands or get into career and technical education. Guess what? They do better academically. But this sort of one-size-fits-all approach that everybody's going to be college ready or everybody should go to a four-year university, which I think is implicit in the current system, ignores the fact that there are multiple pathways to success. And what I've recommended is really alternative approaches, have a pathway oriented towards a college degree, college preparatory pathway with emphasis on math and science, one with emphasis on humanities and fine arts, and another with a career-oriented pathway where young people have the opportunity to get an industry-certified credential by the time they graduate from high school. And there are good-paying jobs out there for people who don't necessarily have a post-secondary education, or they can go on to some of our excellent community colleges and Texas State technical colleges for associate degrees and get a skilled trades. But I think we've neglected the skilled trades, and we're paying a heavy price. The average age of a master plumber in the state of Texas is 56. Average age of a welder nationally is 55. Of a stonemasonry craftsman is 69. We've got an aging workforce, and we've denigrated and ignored career and technical training and sort of fit everybody, and everybody's going to be part of the knowledge industry. And we're losing a lot of kids who wind up as dropouts or throwaways because we're not giving young people multiple pathways, and we're focusing, in my estimation, on an excessive emphasis on teaching to the test, and test learning has replaced real learning. And I think it also hurts the college-oriented kids because you're hurting in terms of the loss of critical thinking skills and analytical skills because of this excessive focus on teaching to this sort of end-of-year test. And those of us who are conservatives, we believe in local control. And yes, there needs to be accountability, but I think we've forgotten local control in recent years with the current model that's operative here in Texas.
It looks like Mr. Hammond might, looks like Mr. Hammond might want to respond, or would Commissioner, okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Bill.
This expensive program costs $20 per year per child. I mean, that's the quality control program. The state of Texas spends $50 or $60 billion, and then we're saying, okay, we want to have $20 a year for testing. I mean, the career and technology education, of which we are strong supporters, of which the leader of the Career and Technical Association of Texas has stated affirmatively that the end-of-course exams and the 4x4 program are not, I quote, not a hindrance to people going on to careers.
Bill, you haven't been talking to folks out in the field who are
I've been
vocational
talking to
technical
Robin Penovich,
education.
who is the
She
chairman.
doesn't speak for everybody in career and technical education. You've got TIVA, you go talk to the vocational and technical educators who have their kids dragged away from career and technical training because they got to go prepare for the test. And by the way, career and technical aspects are not on this test.
I'm going to let Professor Heinrich jump in here, and then Commissioner Williams.
I'll wait my turn.
Okay.
Well, I think if there's one thing that's very important for us to understand, first of all, I think everyone on the panel agrees that accountability is important. We've moved to a system of outcomes-based accountability, and testing has, for a long time, had a role in education. So I don't think there's anyone saying we shouldn't have high standards, that we shouldn't have testing, and there shouldn't be accountability. But I think one thing that has been lost, and now there's an absolute consensus, conservative and liberal thinking, that we have put too much emphasis, too much focus on testing. Mr. Hammond, I saw a video of interview of you in which you had said it into the camera, the end-of-course exams will tell us the truth. Well, as someone who's looked at, I have my hands in data every day. I've done research on this. I was part of the National Academy of Sciences panel, which looked at the research. The tests are incapable of telling us the truth. They are a sample from a limited number of domains of learning, and that's, I think, what Commissioner Pauken was pointing out. We sample questions from those domains, and then we sample students' performance on a given day of the year. I was very happy to hear you say we need to move end-of-course exams back, because I've heard teachers talking about how they have to change their teaching because they don't have enough time. They're going to not go deeper because they need to cover material for end-of-course tests. But as a statistician, each of these times we sample with error. We compile the data, there's error in those data. I see them for Texas, I see them for other states in my work. And they can be used appropriately for diagnosis. I think that was your point, Commissioner, that if you have a number of different indicators and they're all lighting up and saying there's something wrong, then that's when we bring some stronger tools to address those problems. But tests themselves cannot be wielded like a mallet, and they cannot be the only tool that we apply. And there's the dollar cost of testing, and then there are the opportunity costs. What the kids don't learn in the classroom because they're focused on the tests, the decisions the kids make, and there's documented evidence that there's dropout, withdrawal. One of the principles that we learn in academics and in medicine is do no harm. We are doing harm. There are kids who are internalizing failure, and as you said, the more tests we have and the more times we tell them you're failing, you retake, you fail, that does change people's behavior. And then we don't direct them in other promising ways for their career. So again, it's one tool, but it's a limited tool, and we need to treat it like that, respect its limitations, and use it accordingly.
Commissioner Williams.
If I could respond as it relates to several facts, Tom. It's interesting, today in Texas schools, there are 16 career and technology clusters. There are 1.3 million high schoolers that we had in 2011, and of those, 1 million of them took at least one career and technology course. 660,000 of them were concentrators. They took at least two. You can get a certificate, an industry certified certificate, in 116 different areas. And when you mentioned Alamo Academy. Alamo Academy in San Antonio is doing what you think is wonderful work within the confine, within the boundaries of the current 4x4. And think about those youngsters. Those youngsters, actually 85% of them who took career technology courses graduated in the 4x4. Folks are doing wonderful things out there at schools, with relationships with community college, with industry folks, and oh, by the way, local control. The reason San Antonio creates an academy of that nature, or they do one in McAllen, you use an HVAC and other kinds of activity, because they've looked at what are their needs in their communities, and that school district created career and technology opportunities for youngsters that meet the industry needs. That's responding as you, I'll let you go, but let me finish one more. And the one more piece is, it's interesting. We say that we have an aging group of plumbers and welders, and we do, but we got aging engineers. We got aging, software engineers. Unfortunately, us baby boomers are leaving here, so we got a lot of folks aging. What the state was trying to do here is say fundamentally that there is a core body of knowledge that a youngster needs to have to get a baccalaureate degree, an associate degree, or certificate, and that core is the 4x4. And that's the policy decision of this state. It says that we want to prepare a kid to be able to have a choice about whether he wants to go to the flagship institution with the University of Texas A&M, he wants to go to a 4-year institution with the Texas State or Sam Houston, some other, whether he wants to go to a 2-year college, whether he or she wants to get a certificate or go to the military. And we cannot afford to backtrack on that, because we need the energy and the talent from those youngsters. And we're not moving those. Those youngsters are actually getting the career and technology piece that you would want them to have in the current system.
No, they're not, Michael. I mean, that's not reality, and that's not the truth. I mean, it just isn't the case. You can talk to industry leaders across the state. But are you telling me every student who goes to high school needs to have 4 math and 4 science courses, as opposed to every student getting a core basic
Tom,
English? Let me finish now, Mike.
Yes, sir.
Getting a core basic English and a core math program, and then go multiple pathways. This is what's happening is you've got this 4x4 restrictive curriculum and so much emphasis on measurements from the top down, from state all the way down through the administrators, then the teachers, that you're going to be judged by how you do on this test, that there is pressure, and it's not just on the career and technical education side. A chemistry teacher in San Antonio just wrote from a very prominent high school. They just had preliminary STAR test. And afterwards, he's going to have to spend most of his year preparing the students for the STAR test, and they're going to lose lab activities. And you hear this over and over again. Are all the teachers around the state of Texas wrong in what they're saying? And most of them, I would suggest to you, are saying this system isn't working. And I don't understand why. I mean, I'll be frank. I was not the greatest in science. I'm glad I didn't have to take 4 science courses in high school. But I think that those who want to have a math and science emphasis, that's fine. But those who want to have a humanities and fine arts, let them take a couple of courses like algebra and geometry. And let those who go in career training take a couple of courses in math, and then have the opportunity to go in the area of their emphasis and go on to college. The example, there are quite a few of those kids that come out of Alamo Academy. They start working right out of school, and guess what? They work with their hands. Many of them get a certificate as an electrician. Then they can go on to be an electrical engineer. But I would argue that it's very difficult to work around the existing system in order to provide for career and technical education and get those industry certificates under the current system. Just talk to the administrators, talk to the voc ed teachers around the state, and overwhelmingly, they tell me, and I think that it's very difficult with the restrictive current system of both the curriculum and the testing system.
Morgan, can I respond to one thing?
Go ahead.
Just one. I won't be long. The interesting time when we mention about the opportunities that the youngsters have, the 4x4 is only 16 of the units that a youngster has to take in order to graduate. They're going to graduate with 26. They got 6 electives they can devote towards career and technology courses. They can trade out a math or science, the 4th year math or science, for a career and technology class. They can take the fine arts requirement for graduation and trade that out for a career and technology course. There are 9 opportunities for that 9 of the 26, quite frankly, to graduate, for the youngster to be able to devote towards a career and technology experience. If that's not an ample opportunity, I'm not sure what would be, particularly when every school has to have and offer at least 3 of the clusters.
Go ahead.
Okay, I would like to point out that half the kids who go to community college today have to take remedial courses. And 2/3 of the jobs of the future and today require some form of post-secondary education. The good jobs that are going to produce enough wages to support a family are going to require kids to go on beyond high school to get certified or to get an associate's degree or beyond. And when we have a system that says half the graduates can't go on without taking remedial courses, which is a totally screwed up system and stands in the way of a lot of people getting an associate's degree or a certificate, then the system isn't working. Accountability works. Over a 20-year
Bill,
period, Tom, don't interrupt me. I'm not interrupting you. Over 20 years, if you look at Hispanics, 8th grade, math, 3 years of gain. The NAEP is telling us that. As far as dropouts are concerned, we've had 20 years of accountability. Dropouts are down.
Bill, but we've been doing it your way for 15 years.
Let's
no, we haven't, Tom. No, not at all. This is an entirely different system. What we did
is completely different.
How it's completely different. In the early grades, we had some sort of a decent system in terms of testing, K through 8. In high school, we primarily relied on one test to test all the subjects for all 4 years. That is a failed model. Now we've moved to what should be a final exam in high school for the 4 basic courses in the 4 years. And
Professor
this is
Heinrich,
a system that can work and produce the results if we allow it to. The superintendents of this state are suing everybody in this room. They're not suing the state, they're suing you to get more money from your wallet. Is that correct? Everyone knows that? 500 districts have asked to be absolved of any responsibility for accountability.
Mr. Hammond, I'm afraid we're getting a little off track here. Professor Heinrich, why don't you?
So I think, Mr. Hammond, the point that too many kids are coming out and going to community college is not prepared is correct. One of the things we've learned from it, this is coming out very strong and consistent from the research, is that, for example, those kids who would go to community college, get an associate's degree in some kind of technical training, would greatly benefit if we would take that kind of training into high school and integrate that with the basic skills instruction. It's much more effective for them. So, as you were pointing out, but one of the things we've learned in accountability systems across a range of policy areas, workforce development, welfare policy, elsewhere, is that what's measured ends up being what matters. And so what you need to do is you need to have a system, if you're going to rely on testing, which has multiple indicators for the multiple pathways students can take. So have as part of your system not just those EOCs, but an alternative for those kids who are going to take this pathway and are come out better prepared to do the technical education. So, and I have told you, I'm not against testing. It's how we use it. So the high stakes you attach to it. It was very interesting to me to hear that there was a question posed to the Texas Education Association about, well, how do the EOCs, the scores that come out, how do they relate to the ACTs and SATs? A very reasonable question, because one of the things we could do is we could rely on the ACTs and SATs for those who are college bound. Well, the TA responded that they need about 3 years to evaluate that. If we need about 3 years to evaluate that, to understand the properties of this test in practice, why are we trying to attach high-stakes consequences to it immediately for those students whose pathways are going to be impacted and their choices in education, and the teachers who are trying to determine where they need to focus their efforts in teaching? So, let's be reasonable about it. We're not saying we don't need testing, but we need to avoid the perversions of the system that exist, and it's not just here in Texas, it's across the board, and work with that and be open to change and to using them more effectively, diagnostically. So there has to be change if you're going to be effective in the path you're on.
Have it as a final exam that all of us took in high school. I mean, we had final exams, and they weren't the end of the world, and the system didn't say to the teachers that you have to do benchmark testing, which is completely locally imposed. They didn't say you had to do drill and kill or teach for the test. Teach the damn material and let the kids take a final exam.
They're measured by how they do on this STAR test as it comes into practice. They're measured before by the TOS test. The whole emphasis is on that test. Why not go to back to the Iowa standardized test for grade school, and you can see where, well, but look, why not just have a test for high school for Algebra 1 and English 3 for all of the students, but why require all of these students, every student, to be tested on 4 math, 4 science courses?
Because that's the kind of education that they're going to need to get a job which will allow them to be a net contributor to society and go on beyond high school and get a post-secondary degree or certificate of some kind.
And Commissioner Williams, do you see a need for this alternative pathway, an alternative assessment for students who aren't following this the traditional 4x4 graduation?
Morgan, the point I tried to make earlier is that with 26 credits that a student's going to accomplish by the time that they graduate from high school, and with the 4x4 only taking up 16 of that, there are 10 credits left, there is already an alternative pathway that's created. That's already available with the 6 electives and being able to trade out the math and science and the fine arts. But I also want to respond to something that Professor mentioned in looking at an alternative test, if you will. Just as sort of an announcement, if you will, I expect the staff to present to me within some short period of time, a couple months or so, a way to maybe allow a youngster to move out from an EOC because of their grade on the AP exam or the International Baccalaureate exam, and perhaps use that as a substitute. That would reduce perhaps some of the pressure, obviously, on students as well.
Another thing, just real quickly, on some of the 4x4 courses are currently taught as applied courses, which are CTE courses. So even beyond the 9 courses you cited, the fourth year CTE courses can be taught as applied 4x4 courses.
And the other thing, I mean, Professor, you mentioned about the opportunity for youngsters to be able to get additional, let's say, career and technology experience. You know, what we probably ought to do, we have about 64 early college, high schools across the state. And we ought to be putting some energy into blowing that up, not just 64 to 640, so that a youngster in high school has the opportunity to have the college experience and perhaps also be able to get credit for going on. And the possibility to get about 60 collegiate credits while you're in high school, and give a youngster that experience.
Too, Michael, they're already doing this in some schools. You can get career and technical education, Mount Pleasant, for example, with the community college up there. They can get electrical certification, and also they're getting dual credit with the community college. So I think we need to do more of that. But again,
they're doing that under the current system, aren't they?
They're having to work around the current system.
But you're also needing to give them an opportunity to demonstrate their success in those types of skills. And so the problem is if you have students who do want to take an alternative pathway and you're telling them, oh, you continue to fail this, you continue to fail that, well, this gives them opportunity to see where there is success in learning. And it's in a pathway they're choosing. And so yeah, go ahead.
Professor, I would just suggest, though, that even for the youngsters who are taking, CTE courses, you know, it is the policy of this state that one of the things that we want to make sure happens is there's rigor and relevance.
Right.
And in the rigor, you're still going to have rigor in the CTE course.
Yeah.
We're still likely to want to test in the CTE course to make sure that youngster learn what we wanted them to learn.
Michael, two comments on that. Number one, they're industry certified credential. But the problem with the existing system, a lot of these students are not able to get into these areas until junior or senior year. And quite frankly, a lot of students wind up dropping out by the age of 16 because they don't see the relevance of education. And if you can, start them earlier if they have the interest, give them the opportunity of career and technical education, all of a sudden the light bulb goes on, they see the importance of math, they see the importance of basic literacy skills, and quite frankly, in our data at the Texas Workforce Commission shows that they do better academically once they see this. But I just think there is too much diversion, if you will, into this preparing for the test. And it hurts both career and technical students as well as the academically students who want to go to a 4-year university. I mean, I have a daughter who teaches suburban district. She says, Dad, I'm getting these kids from the 3rd grade till through high school. They've been programmed, if you will, everything they do is based on how they do on the test. I'm trying to teach them critical learning skills. I'm trying to teach them to be analytical. And guess what? They come up to me after a while and they say, Ms. Pauken, would you just please help us with teach us what we have to know for the test?
So,
and I think this has distorted a system, and this distorted system hurts both those students who are college-oriented and those students who want to be career-ready.
Commissioner, I would want to ask Commissioner Pauken a quick question, but what do you say to somebody who says, okay, maybe that was the issue with the old system. We had this issue of teaching to the test because with the TOKS tests, they were subject-based, they weren't course-based. We're moving now into this new system where the end-of-the-year assessments are based on the courses that students are actually learning that year in the curriculum that the state has set for students to learn. So teachers will not have the same need to do the same type of teaching to the test. If they are teaching the curriculum, then the students should be able to do well in the test.
I'd like, let Dr. Heinrich, because we've talked about this, and she has done a lot of the research on this issue.
I think the problem is that regardless of how aligned is the curriculum, there will be teaching to the test in the sense of teaching how to answer the questions. There's a lot of effort that gets devoted to that away from, I think the point that was made earlier is that we want students to have a love of learning, not a love of how do I get the right answer to this question. And one of the things that has shifted in the use of test score data, which I think is much more productive, is and this has been a failure of No Child Left Behind, rather than saying, does a student reach a certain level of proficiency as by our standard on our test with all its flaws and warts, because they exist in every single test that's out there because of the things I mentioned earlier, why not say how are students learning growing over time? There's a methodology out there called value-added modeling, which has plenty of warts itself, but it gets a little closer to understanding what we care about is students are growing in their learning, that their trajectories are positive. You don't get that in one assessment from one test. You have to look over time. So again, if you want to have end-of-course exams to look at how students are doing relative to the curriculum, I don't have any problem with that. I do have what I'm concerned about is attaching high stakes to that test rather than using it diagnostically, rather than using it to try to figure out where are the biggest challenges, and accounting for the fact that, for example, in high school, the kid who gets a text message from his girlfriend 2 hours before he takes the test saying she's breaking up with him is going to blow that exam, right? And so you have to realize these are, on a different day, he might perform very differently. So let's just back off of those consequences, use that test data, and there are richer ways we can do it. But again, as a way to understand how we can improve rather than to say, and this is the other problem. The Texas Tribune had a great graphic earlier this year where they showed the labeling of schools from academically unacceptable to excellent, or whatever, the exemplary, whatever that final category is. And the percentage of disadvantaged, and this is over 5 years, the percentage of disadvantaged children in a school is perfectly negatively correlated with that. So you can perform much better if you have very few academically or economically disadvantaged kids, and it goes the other way on the other spectrum. It's been consistent. So we are not accounting for those kinds of challenges. We're not looking into what schools need to improve rather than just measuring them. And as you call more and more schools unacceptable, then more and more kids and economically advantaged kids leave those schools. It perpetuates. So I think those, again, just keep it in mind that those are the risks we take when we wield these tests with such high stakes.
Professor, remember what I said at the top of this conversation, that I expect that staff at TEA is going to present to me a new way for us to make the determination on accountability in school districts. And I expect that it will have some features that relate to student to growth, that relate to the performance of youngsters that are Black, Hispanic, and economically disadvantaged, that may have different weights for that. So I expect to see that. So we're really talking about a system perhaps that we may have that some may have some troubles with today, that may not be the system that we have going forward. And so, and it seems to me, I'm getting more advice than anybody should at this point in time in their life, but I had a conversation with a former commissioner who said that it's really not the test that people are concerned about, it's the accountability system, because what is happening, superintendents are driving downward that kind of pressure.
Yeah, but why are they doing that? Because the pressure's from the state.
Because there are consequences.
On them.
There's no doubt.
And we
want there to be consequences. I mean, Tom, taxpayers want to know that they're getting bang for the buck. And hold up now. Moms and dads want to know how their kids are performing against the Chinese and Indians. And the kid in that classroom wants to know how he or she's competing compared to somebody else. But there are consequences. But we can release some of that pressure.
It all becomes an abstract intellectual numbers game, Michael. I'll give you an let me comment, Michael, if I may.
Dog. Oh, hold up.
Well, let me comment, Michael. Let me finish my thought. As one teacher said, I think very cogently, she said, guess what happens? With all this pressure, and you acknowledge it, from the state to the superintendents, down to the teachers, they're focused, they're measured by how people do on this test, TOS and now STAR. She says, guess what? The kids that we know are going to pass, they tend to get ignored. The kids who are not going to pass, they tend to get ignored. And the focus is all on the kids who are on the bubble. This is kind of but that's what happens. You've got this quantitative measurement system in place that needs to be changed.
So I'm going to let Commissioner Williams respond, and then I think we'll open it up for questions. So everyone gets lined up.
Here's what I'm saying. We have that. Professor would say, as you wrote in a commentary, that's a perverse response by either that classroom teacher or that campus to this endeavor. But let's not say that there's no benefit from that. If you look on the NAEP exam, as Bill mentioned earlier, and you look at what has happened with Black and Hispanic fourth graders, we are now outperforming Black and Hispanic fourth and eighth graders on math and reading across the country. We're fourth with Black kids, I think sixth with Hispanic kids. You can't tell me that there's no benefit from it. And we don't want to go back to a circumstance where you had in a large urban school district in this state, where as late as 1990, we weren't even testing Black kids. We didn't care about how they were performing. We can't go back to a circumstance when you've got a state that 60% of this state, our student body, is economically disadvantaged, and where 63% of it is Black or brown. We cannot go back to a circumstance where we don't care about where those youngsters are performing.
So that's what we're advocating.
I'll let Mr. Hammond jump in if you can make it
I think that if you read the resolution that 500 school districts in this state have passed, it says we need to go to multiple measures, which is what you all are talking about of some sort, which I guess means more testing. I don't even understand how that's going to work, because they're already complaining about too much testing, but they want more. They're also talking about sampling. Sampling is a prescription for going back to the bad old days, like Commissioner Williams just talked about, when we did not disaggregate the data. Because what's going to happen under sampling is they're going to pick out the best kids of each category, and those are going to be the ones that are going to get tested, and the kids who need it the most are going to get left behind. Don't interrupt me. I don't want you to interrupt me. Those are kids who need it the most, the Blacks and Hispanics of this state who are being failed by the current system, are going to be ignored just like we did 20 years ago.
You're running the current system, and guess who drops out? The Hispanic and African American kids, because they don't see the relevance, and they're dropping out of high school.
On the SAT exam, we just saw an increase in the last 4 years.
I'm going to let Professor Heinrich respond. Then we're going to take a question, and then maybe we can get to your last point.
Mr. Hammond, is that's not sampling to pick kids. Sampling is you do random sampling, so everybody has an equal chance of being tested.
Will manipulate the sampling.
Okay, so let's just and I wanted to say to Commissioner Williams, if you have your staff working on those things, and you spend the appropriate amount of time, and then come out and before you then take the system and right away attach a lot of high stakes to it, let us see what we learned from that. And I'm not saying, because we have learned a lot. Now, we can't attribute the gains to accountability per se. There's no study out there that causally attributes having accountability to gains. But the fact, like you said, the fact that we are including all kids. We care about all kids. We have information to help all children. Let's just use that.
Did.
Right, and that's why we're all for accountability.
Accountability doesn't count for the increases
That's why
in
we're for
Hispanic?
accountability.